Okay, so this is a review of the first half of this unit. We're going to start out with given a coordinate and finding our trig functions based on that. So if we plot -4, -6, we will land in this quadrant. Notice I am drawing it to the x-axis. We moved -4 on the x and -6 on the y. We would use the Pythagorean theorem to find that third side, the hypotenuse. So we get 16 plus 36, and we're going to take the square root of 52. Okay, so 52 will simplify to 2 square root of 13. Alright, so for our main functions, sine, cosine, and tangent, we're going to look for those first. So -6 over 2 square root of 13. So we could simplify -6 and 2 to be -3 over the square root of 13. So if we move that radical, we're going to move that up to the top and put it out in the bottom. Okay? That would be your sine value. For cosine, we're going to use this adjacent, -4 over 2 square root of 13. Again, we're going to simplify that radical, or that fraction, 4 and 2, and then we're going to move the radical to the top and take it out in the bottom again. Okay, so that's our cosine. For tangent, we're using opposite over adjacent, and that gives us a negative or a positive 3/2. All right, now remember your reciprocal values are just the reciprocal of what you already have. Okay, so if I wanted cosecant, then I can look right here before I rationalize the denominator, and I could just turn this upside down, and that would be my cosecant. Okay, for my secant, I could look right here before I rationalize the denominator and just turn it upside down, and that's going to give me my secant. All right, and then for the cotangent, we can just look at the fraction that we ended up with and turn it upside down. Okay, so remember the reciprocal functions are just taking the value and flipping it. Okay, so you've got some of those. Then the next thing I want to look at is, given an angle, try to find the values. Okay, so now I'm giving you an angle measure. I want you to find out where this is, and notice I did tell you they were quadrantals, so that means they're going to land on the axis, right? So if we have 3/2 pi, each quadrant is a half, so this would be 3/2 pi. It would be landing on 270, right? Well, at 270 we have coordinates of 0, -1. So if I wanted the cosine here, remember cosine is x over r. Our x is 0, and in a unit circle our radius is 1. So the cosine of this 270-degree angle is 0. All right, now pi. If I were graphing pi, that's right here at 180. Remember those coordinates are -1, 0. And this time we want the cotangent. So let's just think. Cotangent is a reciprocal of tangent. Tangent is y over x. So cotangent is x over y. So let's write that one. X was -1. Y is 0. So this gives me an undefined value for the cotangent of pi. And then our last graph is a negative pi over 2. So -90 degrees. It would land on this 270 again. This time I want the reciprocal of sine. Sine is y over r, so the reciprocal is r over y. So my radius is 1. My y value is -1. So the cosecant of -pi over 2 is -1. So make sure you can find the quadrantals. Remember in a unit circle what those values are. And then that radius is always 1 in a unit circle. It is the distance from the center to the side or to the coordinate. Okay? All right. The next thing is we are going to look at angle measures and constraints. Okay? So here I'm giving you a function and its value. Now remember, the value is the ratio. That's opposite over hypotenuse, adjacent over hypotenuse, those types of values, ratios. Okay, so since this one is secant, that is hypotenuse over adjacent. So what I need to do is figure out where is this graph landing, and it gives me some information. I know that secant, or the reciprocal of cosine, is negative. So let's think, where is cosine negative? That means where is x negative, right? So if we look here, x is negative in the second quadrant and the third quadrant. So that's quadrant 2 and quadrant 3. But we also have another constraint, so it's given us some more information. Sine, or the y, is less than 0. It's also negative. Okay? So sine is negative because it's less than 0. Well, let's look at sine. That's my y. That's here. So y is negative in quadrants 3 and 4. So the quadrant they have in common is quadrant 3. This is where my angle is going to land. Okay? And again, I've got the center angle as my the angle I'm basing my sides on. So I'm going to plug this in. I know it's the hypotenuse is 11, and I know that the adjacent is 8, and it's the thing that gets the negative, okay, because hypotenuse is always positive. So our adjacent side had to have the negative number in it. Now I do need to find this other value. I need to find the y measure so that I can give you the ratios, okay? So we're going to do the Pythagorean theorem. So a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So we have 64 plus b squared is 121. And if we move that 64 over, we're going to get 121 minus 64. We're going to get square root of 57. Okay? And I don't think that there's anything we can do about that. So square root of 57 is going to be our other side. Now you can give me sine, cosine, and tangent. Cosine is just going to be the flip of the one we have. But now we have sine is square root of 57 over 11. And then tangent would be square root of 57 over negative 8. When you flip these for the cosecant, secant, and cotangent, just be aware that your radical cannot go in the bottom. Okay? Make sure you make that adjustment and flip those fractions. Okay? Alright, so you have one restraint here, secant has to be negative, and another restraint here, sine had to be negative. We want to look to see where they are, or what quadrant they have in common before we plot it. Okay, so let's look at the next one. Alright, we have two constraints. Now this one says that secant is undefined. Now I know that one is on an axis because the only time I get an undefined is on an axis. Okay, so this is something over 0, right? 1 over 0 to be undefined. So secant is hypotenuse over adjacent. So your adjacent is 0. Your radius or hypotenuse is 1. Now, this is my other constraint. Okay? So here we have an x value of 0. Alright, now if we're thinking about our quadrantals, these have an x value of 0. right? 90 and negative and 270. This is the other constraint. It's between negative pi over 2 and positive pi over 2. So if I have an x value of 0, my two coordinates here are going to be this 90 and this 270. Now I am going to tell you that most of the time one of these will not have an equal sign, okay? Because this is going to change the value. One of them is going to be negative, one of them is going to be positive, okay? So you could do sine, cosine, and tangent of each of them and then flip them to give you the other values, okay? So look at your constraints and make sure that you are plotting all those things where they need to go, okay? So the next thing is that you are given some angle measures, and we need to look for the reference angle and then find that that trig value. Now these, some of them are special angles, some of them are not. If they are a special angle, because 3 pi over 2 is 270, and remember at 270 we have 0 and negative 1, cosine would be x over r, so that's 0 over 1 or 0. So cosine of 3 pi over 2 is 0. If you used your calculator, you should get that. When we look for 210 degrees, that's in the third quadrant, and that is a 30-degree reference angle, okay? So if this is a 30-degree angle, that's one of my special triangles. Opposite of 30 is 1, adjacent to 30 is square root of 3, and the hypotenuse is 2. Because it's located in the third quadrant, the y is negative and the x is negative. So if I want the cotangent of this angle, that is going to be adjacent over opposite, or x over y. Okay? So our x is negative square root of 3. Our y is negative 1. So our cotangent of 210 is square root of 3. Alright? Now, if they give you an angle that is not a special angle, you are going to have to use your calculator. Okay? Just to remind you, if it's a reciprocal, you have to do 1 over the reciprocal function. Okay? 1 over the reciprocal function. So we want negative 4.3 angle measure. So all we have to do is go 1 over sine of negative 4.3. And if they want it in degrees, then we're going to need to make sure our calculator is in degree mode. And that is going to be negative 13.3. Okay, well, 4 decimals, you can round it to 4, you can round it to 1. Okay? Alright, you're looking for values here. That means we want the ratio. We don't want an angle measure. We already have an angle measure. That's what these are. Okay? This one happens to be a radian. Okay? So let's just change my calculator, because I think if I put it in radian, I'm going to get something different. I do. I get 1.09. Now I had written down a negative answer there. Okay? So just be aware we're on a negative angle. Alright? And we need to just make sure that we're getting the correct value. Okay? Alright, so I'm going to have to do the other part of the review in another video. So make sure you watch the second part of this.